use the Kerbside Costing Tool? Well, it's a national model and there are hundreds of combinations that can be compared. We've recently had it peer reviewed and it's very much fit for purpose, relevant and up to date. It will provide you with a good fit to compare your own local authority situation and try and take out some of the contextual variables that can be tricky to consider. The Kerbside analysis tool has been about 20 years in development and it's been refined on multiple occasions. The Kerbside Costing Tool and the Kerbside analysis tool are based on real local authority data, and we've done extensive research to make sure that round sizes really are true to what you see on the ground. We've done a lot of research on costs, whether it be on vehicles, containers, salary costs, also on gate fees, and we produce an annual report on gate fees, as I'm sure many of you know. When we were predicting yields, we took a lot of expert statistical advice and looked very carefully at real life yields that are reported through the Waste Data Flow website. So I mentioned that we need to be comparing apples with apples and not apples with bananas. It's really careful, you have to be really careful with this. When you're looking in the tool, you will be generating results from notional authorities that are similar to your situation, but not absolutely your own authority. Whoops, the slide just jumped on there. Don't know how it did that. Sorry about that. So just be careful. But as we run through it, we'll explain that to you in more detail. So a little bit more background. In 2008, the first indicative cost and performance model project was set up by RAP. And then we updated that in 2015. And when we were looking at the outputs, there were so many outputs that we decided actually we needed a tool to allow people to understand their own situation rather than read through tables and graphs galore in a report. As I mentioned, it's based on the Kerbside analysis tool, which is RAP's own in-house local authority collections model. It allows comparisons that take away the contextual variables, and they're based on national local authorities, but also notional situations. You can do some really good efficiency comparisons on round sizes and pass rates, cost comparisons based on collection costs, total costs, gate fees, things like that. But just a health check, a health warning, the Kerbside analysis tool, there's a clue in the name there. And so the model is based on curbside rounds and not flats. We know that there's a real wide variation in collections from flats because the situation varies wildly for collection crews. You might be walking up to 5 minutes to go and pick up a bin. You might have to unlock gates, go into bin stores. And we know there's some really big variations. So it hasn't been possible up till now to model these scenarios. What we are working on is an app for phones and tablets that will allow you to do much cheaper and cost-effective flat survey for inventories. So we'll keep you all updated on how that piece of work is going. Quick word on rurality, which is a term we introduced in last week's webinar. So for those of you that weren't able to join us, it's a system that was specifically designed for RAP's local authority support program. And there are 6 classifications, and they are based on the geographical factors. So I'll be looking at an urban authority, a mixed rural-urban authority, or a predominantly rural authority. And the reason we've selected this as a factor when describing our different authorities or ruralities is that we know that the driving time between properties can be very variable between a very urban setting and a very rural setting. Then we've got a deprivation factor. We know that set out rates for recycling collections are lower in areas of higher deprivation. So we have two categories here, high deprivation and lower deprivation. So 3 times 2 equals 6. That gives us our 6 classification. And the reason that we've picked these two factors, geography and deprivation, is because you can't control those as a local authority. What you can control is your choice of collection schemes. So what type of vehicles you're using, the degree of sorting that happens at the curbside, and the frequency of collections. Here, I just wanted to show you how many local authorities are represented in each rurality. And you can see that we've got at least 43 authorities and data from those authorities fitting into our nice, neat 6 categories. So that should provide you with confidence that we've got lots of different situations represented within those ruralities. So we have to flick in between to the local authority portal now and straight into the tool.
Okay, just in case anyone is not on LA portal. Yeah, so the URL, the website is laportal.rap.org.uk. It's very simple to register. Click register there. I've got one that I did earlier just to show you how quick, just very small pieces of information needed. Click submit. Oh, I already did it with that one. Let me just log in. Yeah, but it logs you in very quickly. So last week, as Julia said, we did a webinar on these first 3 sections of the LA portal. So that will be available soon, I think, on the RAP website if you missed that last week. But now we're going to go into the Kerbside Costing Tool.
Thanks, Patrick. So enter the online tool. So I'm going to choose Cherwell today because we're based in Banbury and Cherwell is our local authority. So I can start off by just typing in CH. And oh no, I've gone into Charnwood. Whoops. Bear with me. Where have you gone, Cherwell? Oh no, we're at Chorley. Oh, very sensitive mouse today. Right. As you see, Rurality 6 is where Cherwell District Council is sitting in terms of our categories. So you can actually change this if you think in your local authority situation that our category doesn't quite fit, and sometimes local authorities might straddle different situations. You can actually just click on this drop-down menu and change that. But we're going to keep Cherwell in Rurality 6 for now. So we know that for the current service here, we've got a fortnightly residual collection, and then there's a fortnightly commingled collection. And for our comparison scenarios, so things we might want to change in the future, we've got some options here. We're going to keep our residual frequency as fortnightly. And in Cherwell currently, residents can dispose of their food waste along with their garden waste. But for this one, we're going to say that food will be collected, and that will be a separate collection. Okay, we've got some handy options here now. As with all models, the more unique information that you can provide, the more accurate the results will be to your own situation. So for Cherwell, we need to find a gate fee and bulking costs. So we could change those if we knew the costs, but we don't. So we're just going to keep those as the default values, but that's something that you can change if you want to. And same again for food collection and for residual waste collection. But for our demonstration today, we're just going to keep everything the same. Then when we look at results to display, there's some boxes that you can unclick. Say if you weren't interested in the residual waste at this point, you could unclick those, but Patrick will show you those options in a second. And there we are, we've got to the end of setting up the situation for Cherwell. So I'm just going to press calculate results and hand you on to Patrick.
Okay, so along the top here, we have the different scenarios that the tool models for. So the one highlighted in grey, this is your reference. So this is meant to represent as much as it can within the tool what your current schemes are. So we've got the fortnightly commingled collection for dry recycling and fortnightly residual waste and no food collected because it's collected with garden waste. We then have here another 6 scenarios with different schemes, all of them have fortnightly residual waste, and then it's changing on the dry scheme and whether the food is collected separately or whether it's collected along with the residual or dry recycling. So we have the fortnightly commingled with food collected with dry recycling and residual, fortnightly commingled where food is collected separately, fortnightly two-stream, and the 2 streams are fibres and containers with food collected separately, weekly multi-stream with food collected on the dry recycling vehicle, fortnightly 2-stream with glass and then other dry recycling as the 2 streams and food collected separately, and then fortnightly 2-stream, glass and other materials for dry recycling, and then food co-collected with the dry recycling and residual. So this table has costs. We're going to go and look at the cost later in a nice chart at the bottom. And first of all, we're going to have a look at yields here. So for the yields, it's just given for the dry recycling and the food recycling. So for the dry recycling yields, these are based on the 5 main materials. So that's paper, card, glass, cans, and plastic bottles. The assumptions that make these calculations are based on the dry recycling yields from actual average figures from the local authorities that were sampled. They are sorted by the rurality classification, so in this case rurality 6, the frequency of the collection and the type of collection for that. For the food recycling, the figure for the yield is just based on the deprivation. Next, we have round size. So this is the round size in the day, the number of households passed by. So this is presented for all the streams in here. The round sizes are calculated from assumptions based on the rurality category and for the dry recycling, on the scheme used to collect. As you can see, there's a few zeros in the separate food waste collection, and this is where food waste is co-collected with either residual or dry recycling. Because it would be in with that, it doesn't have its own round size. Next on the list, we have pass rate. I've got some nice slides on pass rate, so I'm going to switch back over to our PowerPoint presentation for this. Assess the tool, interpreting results. So the pass rate is the average number of households accrue passes in a productive hour. So just that list equation is the round size, which is in day. Don't know why it's switching on a bit further, divided by the productive time. So this is different from the pick rate. Here we go. So the pick rate, this is a good measure of your efficiency. So the pick rate is the pass rate divided by the presentation rate. And by presentation rate, talking about the percentage of bins left out for collection. And so with residual bins, you'd expect close to 100%, but then with recycling, and once again deprivation comes into this, you'd expect a lower presentation rate. for this. And so this is really with the pick rate and the productive time. This is stuff you can really use to think about the efficiency of the collection crews and how much is being collected with this. So what do we mean when we're talking about productive time? So it's all the time on the core round, including driving around the round, but it doesn't include the drive to the start of the round, the drive to the end of the round, drive to the tip, the waiting to tip the vehicle, rest breaks, and any vehicle checks. However, this is a good thing to kind of compare and think about within your own collection crews, and with the pass rate, with the pick rate even, it's definitely something you can think about, where how do the pick rates look on here, and how do they compare to your own pick rates? And so also with productive time, just flipping back and forth a bit here for applications, you can calculate your own productive time. So you could use some geographical information systems. Companies such as Bartek, Mayrise Yotta, Web ASPX, and RouteSmart can help with actually going around and with GIS recording where your crews go, so you can get an idea of your own productive time. That would be useful. Okay, so then the other thing involved on the tool is around the collection costs. And there's a nice little bar chart here that goes through it. If there's any schemes which you know that you really can't bother to look at, nothing to do, you can go up, see what it is. So I am going to put this in later, but say fortnightly 2-stream of fibers and containers I'm not interested in, can deselect it, and then it will get rid of it from the charts down there. I am going to keep this in for now though. So we've got the reference to start off with over here, just like above. And then down here, we've got a little key telling you what the different costs are involved. So the first one, if you hover over it, it tells you the actual cost there. So that's the collection costs for dry recycling. So these costs here, probably start talking about this here. The collection costs are, so that's based on the vehicle maintenance, the initial cost of the vehicle, and then also the cost, the main cost, bulk of the cost of this actually comes from the salaries for the crew. So the costs we have in here right now for that are a few years old. However, a recent study we did showed that the actual real wages for collection crews hasn't risen in the past 5 years. So we think this still gives an accurate representation. So as well as collection costs, we've then got the dry gate fee. I'll move across to one where if we have a dry material income, so it says down here what it's for, so when we've got 2 streams, you can see we're actually getting a dry material income. That will be shown on here, and that will reduce the overall net cost. We have the food treatment fee, the collection costs for residual, and the residual waste disposal. And then this orange one is the overall cost here, the number at the top. So as Julia talked about earlier, what we're really wanting to do is compare apples to apples, because this cost here, which is the per household per year cost of the whole collection scheme for all waste, this may be completely different from what you know your actual costs are. However, you can use to compare it to other schemes to see if it will be more expensive, if it will be cheaper, and so start to think about, if you were to change the schemes, what are the different costs involved and what could change with that. So just remember, it's indicative. If you want to play around with this, you could change the rurality. So if you think that you might be on the border with another different rurality, you can definitely go in and change the rurality at the top and rerun the tool, and it will give you different results for that. Okay, so that's very briefly the tool. As well as this, on the website, we've got a user guide, PDF document. This is basically a text version of this webinar. Not too long, 19 pages, but just lots of big pictures in it, really. And then we also have the modeling assumptions. So this is all the underlying assumptions that the tool runs on. So if you're unsure how we got to assess how the tool got to a certain number and why it could be so different from what you actually see, then this will be where you can find out where the numbers have got to be so different. So yeah, just to make sure with the tools, understand this is quite basic, there are the limitations with it. So it's more indicating what you need to think about rather than what you need to do. So going back to the PowerPoint with this, let's come to the user guide. Okay, so what next? So with the Kerbside Costing Tool, we are currently on ICP3, Indicative Cost and Performance version, ICP2, Indicative Cost and Performance version 2. But we have started the process of updating the tool, so there should be version 3 out at some point in the near future. So as I mentioned earlier, the review suggests that assumptions on costs are similar to 2015, but we are going to look to increase the number of ruralities to 9. So right now we've got 3 different rural categories and 2 levels of deprivation. We're going to move it up to 3 levels of deprivation. And then for you, so this is a good starting point to review scenarios. If you're interested and would like to do a bit more in-depth and accurate modeling, there is a bespoke Kerbside analysis tool available. And then also at WRAP, we can offer help with modeling via our one-to-one support.
Thanks, Patrick. So we've talked about the one-to-one support and more general support. This is our local authority support team. Patrick sits within the waste data team. If you've got specific questions on the local authority portal or on the Kerbside Costing Tool, could you send those queries through to the white email address there, la-recycling@rap.org.uk. More general local authority support questions should go to the blue email, la.support. And if you want to get in touch with any of us individually, the protocol for our emails is our first name, a dot, and then our last name @rap.org.uk. So please do get in touch. We'd love to hear from you. So we've been collating questions as we go along, and Harriet's helping us with those. So we're just going to have a little read and see what your questions are, and then we'll try and answer them.
Shall I take the first one?
Yeah, that'd be great.
I've got a few questions here. David's asking, are there any plans to introduce 3 weekly refuse collection scenarios in the model? Right now, there aren't. We're in the very early stages about looking into version 3 of ICP. But that is a really interesting suggestion, and I'll definitely pass it back up to the team working on it, because that is something I know local authorities are thinking more of doing with 3 weekly residual collection.
So another question, are there any plans to look at the impacts on costs of charged for green waste introduction or removal? So this is a piece of work that we're doing as part of our support to DEFRA on the waste and resources strategy. There's no plans, as far as I'm aware, to include this in the indicative costs and performance tool. Garden waste is a really tricky one because it's so variable depending on the rurality of the local authority, and so variable depending on the year that you're looking at, because the amount of garden waste produced really varies according to rainfall. So it's a really hard one to get a handle on. But I'll certainly mention it to my colleagues within the waste data team, and we'll see what we can do. We had a question from Somerset about updating the tool to reflect their waste partnership situation as compared to the former waste collection authorities. So just a tip there. So it's because we're talking about a notional authority. Have a look at the ruralities 5 and 6. Those will be best for you, I would think, because they are the more rural ones. Taunton, you may want to look at a mixed situation, or possibly even urban. If you and then it will be about amalgamating the results. I appreciate that's quite difficult to sort of take all those different numbers and put them all together, but it will certainly give you a flavour, and it's about comparing the results from the baseline notional authority to the scenarios as they're modelled.
I've got a question from Robert here about what about the potential to collaborate, working with SMEs in the sector, or what's the best approach? Locally based organisations have more connections to the community than local authorities.
So your team, Patrick, are doing more work on business waste and commercial
Yeah.
waste. There's a big project on zoning. So
introduced to so the idea of having zoning areas, so having one or two waste collectors working in certain zones to collect the waste, to make that more efficient for SMEs and businesses. And then there's also plans to look at developing more support and tools to help commercial waste collection and to increase recycling on that. It's definitely on the radar of RAP. I can't see the use of this tool for it right now, but there are definitely plans to develop tools in the future, but we're very much still in the scoping phase of that. Another question, are there any plans to look at including flats within the tool?
Not currently, because of the difficulty we have in modelling the key pieces of information that feed into the Kerbside analysis tool. So the difference between the Kerbside analysis tool that we use in RAP and the GIS tools that you might be familiar with on your vehicles, such as Bartech or route modelling tools like Web Aspects. So those tools look at driving times, and the Kerbside analysis tool looks at the differences between loading of different types of containers and different types of materials, and how they vary depending on how much sorting the householder does. So that's one key difference. The other key difference as well is how long it takes to pick up these containers. So how long does it take for an operative to get his or her hands on a bin as compared to a set of bags or a set of boxes. And we've done that with years worth of video analysis. The difference with flats, as I said, is how long it takes a crew to pop from the vehicle across a courtyard, down a back alley, through a series of gates to get to the communal bin. And so we've struggled how to model that, because even on a just flats round, there'll be lots of variation from estate to estate. Definitely look out for our flats inventory app when that comes out in the future, and that may help you a little bit.
Okay, so another question here. Does the tool spit out spreadsheets that you can then use to do further analysis of? So no, it doesn't. And I think the reason behind that is the fact that this is quite a basic tool with a lot of assumptions, and so we really discourage you to use it to do further analysis beyond what we're giving you there, because it is just meant to be quite indicative. But if you are interested in doing further analysis and thinking more with modelling, is we do have the Kerbside analysis tool that's available to you, and we'd also be happy if you were to contact RAP to help guide you through and how to use that. And with that, there's a lot of potential for more analysis to happen on the results from that.
Absolutely. Okay. We've got a question in here from Caroline. I've looked at the model before and the costs are wildly different from what I think my local authority is paying. Why is that? It's going back again to this point about the local authorities in the model as being notional. So the costs that we're producing from the tool aren't exactly your own situation, you could change the rurality setting and see what that does to the costs. But keep looking at comparisons between the baseline and the scenarios. You could also click onto those drop-down menus and maybe change your MRF gate fee or your residual treatment costs. So there is some scope to make things a little bit more bespoke to your own situation.
Okay. So Robert's just also asked, so there's a pilot you might be interested in around flats. Who best to start a conversation? I think just for this, yeah, well, Julia's raising her hand. And Julia, what's the general email address that someone would, if they wanted to start a conversation with RAP, would you advise them to?
So there is the, either get in touch with me, julia.bragg@rap.org.uk. I've been working with Resource London on their flats recycling project, so I can help you with some information from there, or just use the general la.support@rap.org.uk. Emails will be directed to the relevant people in the team.
Okay, Dan Thomas, so is there any intention to include Welsh local authorities within the ICP tool?
Oh, tricky. This is very much an England-specific tool. Obviously, the Welsh Collaborative Change Programme provides support directly to local authorities. So probably best to get in touch with RAP Cymru on that one. I can email you separately, Diane, with a good person to get in touch with. It's possible that they have their own bank of information, but I know they don't have a tool specifically just for Wales.
And talking, just to go back to the curbside analysis tool, the CAT tool, or CAT that I was talking about earlier. So that model is all on an Excel document. So the output from that is in spreadsheets and can be easily used for more analysis.
To get hold of the curbside analysis tool, which is an Excel, you would need to email us. So come through on the la.support email, and we'll talk you through it, explain how it works, and provide you with some support. We don't make it freely available on the website just because it is really quite complicated, but we'll happily support you with that. And as Patrick was saying before, we're always keen to support local authorities on a one-to-one basis. We have a framework contract with a number of environmental consultancies that can do options modelling for you. So do get in touch and we'll see how we can best support you. Okay, I've got a question from Alex. All right, where did you get all your cost data from? I don't recognise the values in those drop-down boxes. Okay, good point, Alex. Tricky question. You can amend them if you like. So behind the tool, there are costs that you can't amend, but trust me when I say that everything's been peer-reviewed within an inch of its life. It was a very long project to get the indicative costs and performance version 2 to being published as a tool. Certainly within Patrick's team who manage all this data, I know they very closely follow all the guidance in the government's Aqua book, which is on quantitative and qualitative analysis. But coming back to costs, things like gate fees have changed a little bit since 2015, and that's to do with market fluctuations for materials. So you're probably all aware that quality's tightened up, particularly in China. And so the material prices dropped as markets shrank. We know that MRFs have had to slow down their sorting lines to make sure that their outputs are really good quality, and that will make gate fees go up a little bit. So that might be why you don't recognise some of those values. Another area where things have increased as well is vehicle costs, and that's because the price of oil has shot up, as we probably all know. When you're producing vehicles, that's really quite an energy intensive process, so unfortunately the vehicle manufacturers pass on their costs to local authorities. But just keep focusing on those comparisons between the different scenarios. And then you're looking at percentage differences really, rather than absolute pounds costs. I hope that helps.
Okay, we've got another question asking, are electronic wastes included in the tool? No, they're not. So for recycling, with that, we are just looking at the main 5 materials for recycling, which are card, paper, plastic bottles, glass, and cans. Okay. A
question from Abigail. Thank you, Abigail. Is there a reason why two-stream and commingle weekly is not included in the scenarios for modelling? Yeah, this goes right back to when we were looking at what local authorities actually offer in England. So what are the common types of collection services? And when we looked at that data, it was apparent that those types of collections weren't regularly on offer. We had quite literally hundreds and hundreds of variations in terms of the scenarios we could offer within the different ruralities. I think it was running at probably 500 or something. So we had to cut things back, and that's the reason really. It's a less frequent offering. Just going to wait and see if we've got any more questions coming in.
Okay, we've got a question from a Karen here. Why do the commingled options often look cheaper? So actually, often the options aren't that different in terms of net costs. So the collection costs do show differences, as things like gate fees and income haven't been taken into account. But really with this, what we need to start thinking about in light of DEFRA's resource and waste management strategy is the cost of the whole service, which to include the separate collection of food waste. In scenarios where food waste is collected on the same vehicle as all the dry materials, then the curbside sort is often more cost effective, especially when compared for two-stream scenarios if glass is kept separate.
Thanks, Patrick. And the issue of the glass there is because there isn't really a value associated with glass anymore. So when Patrick was showing you those scenarios earlier, the reason why we modelled different two-stream options, one with fibre separate and one with glass separate, is that we know in the majority of cases you can get a pretty good income from your fibres. But you may well have to pay to get your glass taken away, even if it's kept separate. Okay. Right, I'm just checking in with Harriet. We don't appear to have any more questions. So thank you, everybody, for joining us. Thank you for listening. And thank you all for your questions. We really hope that was useful. We'll be back running another webinar on the 15th on introducing food waste collections. So do register for that, and we really hope you can join us. If you've got colleagues who you think would benefit from hearing this webinar, or indeed our other webinars, please do share the links. We'll be back in touch with you with the links to this recording and a collation of the questions and answers. But just drop us an email. We're here to help you. Thanks a lot, everyone.